biodiversity-based livelihood opportunities. And in this, as we know, this the topic is more talked in the recent times, at least after the CBD 1992. And though the different ecologists and botanists all worked on these aspects, but in initial it was a explorative purpose only, but later on it was recognized as a more in the terms of the for the livelihood options or the resource generations for the commercial purpose. So the more the direct and indirect uses of the biodiversities were explored by the different people. So I will be talking about the biodiversity. It is audible, no? Hello.
Yes, sir. Of course, you are audible, sir. Perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you. So biodiversity, then what are the facets of the biodiversity? Then landscapes. Biodiversity means in the different landscapes. Biodiversity prevailing, ecological and economic perspectives, the biodiversity resource management, inflation, livelihood dimensions, then some societal interaction and livelihoods, and biodiversity based livelihoods, planning and integration of the activities and way ahead. So I'll be talking on these major heads, but more focusing on the forest based biodiversity only. If we see in the data which is available, so we were having so many diversities in the vertebrates, invertebrates and plants kingdom, and over the period of time, though it is little older, but we have lost many of the species, and this was due to because we took it granted that its nature is self-replicating, but it only replicating self when we have a limited level of stress or the pressure on the natural sources. But due to human greed, or you can say the excessive for the exploitation, resulted in the declining of these resources. So whether it is in mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, as well as amongst the plants also, so many of them are reduced. If you see the overview of the global ecosystem conditions and trends, so in different landscapes, either coastal, forests, or freshwater, even grasslands or agroecosystems, so we see that the area which is comprising the coastal, around 20% land is there, and that is also having a good number of mangrove forest in that areas. Coastal ecosystem itself has a unique composition of diversity. Then we have the forest, which I will be more talking, the 25% globally we have the land, and that also keep on decreasing for the expansion of the agriculture, plantations in various parts of the globe, and there is continuous decline. Later, the few states have made efforts along the globe to conserve the forest sources, and now we are having little bit the accelerating trend in terms of the forest coverage. Freshwater ecosystem, which has the maximum diversity in though we have the less area, but we have the more biodiversity in there. 50% of the world wetlands lost during the last 20 years, so that is also alarming. Grasslands, another major landscapes which have the 40% of the land area, and almost 50% of the centers of the plant diversity as in these grasslands, and there also a significant loss has been occurred during over time. Coming to the ecosystems which were developed by the human beings, which were mainly for the production of the agriculture crops, that agroecosystems also constitute around 28 to 30%, and in that we have the most of the croplands where the maximum production occurs, and these were most of them converted from pasture land, forest lands, and to feed the bulging population. And we see that we have made inroads of the so many other undisturbed areas for the expansion of agriculture, and mainly the tropics. Yes, population certainly is a major indicator which meeting the pressure on this all these landscapes, especially the biodiversity. And globally, if you see the major megadiversity centers, unfortunately, they are also the major population also, except the African continent. If you see the other parts of, the, especially the Asian continent, we have the major population over the period of times. If you see this trend, in what is projected in the 2025, we have the, if the growth rate will remain, so the population pressure will keep on increase again. These mega diversity areas of Brazil, Indonesia, Colombia, Australia, Mexico, Madagascar, China, Philippines, India, Ecuador, Venezuela. So these all the, which are the major biodiversity areas also having the pressure of this population, and which is ultimately a precursor for the pressure on the more growing for the food, industrial development, other things for these large number of peoples, and which will ultimately put pressure on the biodiversity. Just for the brief purpose, we know that in 1992, this biological diversity, the term was coined in that CBD, and that was the first time which was the globally efforts was made to think about the biodiversity. Though academically it was quite long, it was the term was means the efforts was there, and it was term was also used, but in terms of the development aspects or the planners, this was came the first in the forefront to make the policy for this purpose, where we thought so in that the variability among the living organisms from the all sources, including inter alia, terrestrial, marine, and other aquatic ecosystems, and the ecological complexes for which they were part. This diversity not only at the species level but also at the ecosystem levels. So three main categories was given: one on the genetic diversity, species diversity, ecosystem diversity. Among this, the focus was the genetic diversity, which refers the frequency diversity of genes, by species diversity, and ecosystem diversity, which is the variety and frequency of the different ecosystems. We know that at lower level we are able to manipulate also, and with the new biotechnological tools and all, we are trying to even having the genetically modified organisms and all. But at the ecosystem level, or even also species level also, but ecosystem level, to maintain the diversity is becoming a challenging task, because it's having a more complex system than the genes level modifications, because there is several components of the ecosystems are interacting, and those systems are influenced by the variety of factors, not only the climatic factor or edaphic factors, but biotic factors. And also the current era which we are facing, the climate change and all, in that also we see that this is posing the threat on the existing biodiversity, existing plant populations which is there, and also the recomposition of these species in the nature, because we know that the nature favors more in terms of the which are not much usable for the people, and we do our selective management tactics. We modified that biodiversity which is naturally occurring. So when these climatic factors and other degrading factors are affecting these compositions, so the more reversal of the species which are not of that much use for the human beings are coming up, which we are saving some kind of invasive species and some other species which are invading to these more indigenous species. And that is also a major threat in terms of, even we are not means doing the proper management practices or the conservation practices for the particular areas. The number of international conventions are concerned with a specific aspect of the biodiversity, like for the wetlands, we have the Ramsar conventions. Similarly, for we have the convention for threatened endangered species for the restriction of their trades. We also have the convention on the other these kind of migratory birds around the, and besides that global level conventions, we have the regional level and national level conventions too. Regional level conventions are also in the either in Atlantic areas or Asian subcontinent, African subcontinent. They have their own regional conventions to mainly to targeting to how to protect this erosion in the biodiversity. The convention on biodiversity also become one of the central goals of the international these conservation organizations like WWF or IUCN or the UNEP. All these globally are the policymakers and the planners to tackle the global issues in the biodiversity cases, and they are more concerned about the how to protect the biodiversity at the global level, because it is not a isolated incident. It has to be taken in the holistic way, and that's why the all the global organizations are more concerned about that. They are funding most of the projects at the global level, and especially in the southern hemispheres in the tropical countries, because they are the made the treasure house of the biodiversity. And if you see that it is not only just the science, but also it is diversity linked with the socio-cultural aspects of the most of the communities and globally. And we know these communities means our sacred places, sacred groups, and such kind of culturally important species or areas designated in most of in India. We have that kind of thing. Even most of the Asian countries, we have that kind of concept of the traditional way of managing those biodiversity in those sacred places, which now become very essential to trace the historical background of the development of those things. In Rio Earth Summit 1992, they were committed to make the conserving the species using the biological diversity sustainably, and also promoting the sustainable development. Uh, to make more it aware, 22nd May also celebrated Biological Diversity Day. We know that around the globe we have more than 20% of the global population in the forest and tree farms, or around the fringe area of the forest. And obviously when they are residing in those areas, so their whole life is revolve around those forests only, or on those natural sources for their livelihoods. And also they are by participatory way, they are also contributing in terms of the conserving the biodiversity in those areas is through sustainable. Second, the areas which are more nowadays, we have the protected areas or wildlife park and sanctuaries, which are the potential nature basin for. So these areas also, because a common thinking is that they are only for wildlife, but not, they are also quietly linked with the population or the people which are residing in and around these protected habitats, especially tribals and forest dwellers, whose dependency on these protected areas is much more. And as when we declare these protected habitats, so obviously they have to come out from those areas and reside outside. But what about their livelihood options? So government different governments trying for that how that protected area waste ecosystem can be made for the linking with their business activity or their economic activities for their livelihood sustenance. Because the customary activities was they were engaged, that is no more applicable to them. So they have to, as a tourist guide, or engage in some kind of ecotourism project and all, to sub these tourism activities. So that kind of revenue arrangements also make in these kind of wilderness areas to support the local people. And that is only a making a things which is more applicable in terms of building their confidence among them, not only just for to eke out their livelihood or their sustenance, but also to support in these kind of conservation efforts of the government. And that's why most of the protected areas globally, and especially in India, we are seeing this change in the management aspect. Wildlife management plans also specifying especially about the not only the wildlife, but also the human settlements or the people residing in around those parks to be equally addressed their problem for the livelihoods. India is a mega diversity, and we know that 60-70% of the world biodiversity is also available. And to support this much of population, and even the livestock population is around 18% of the globe here. So because when we see the pressure of the only, we have around 2.4% of the whole world geographical area, so that much to sustain that much pressure, uh, and to conserve simultaneously our rich biodiversity, surely a proper management is required in terms of the our terms of our policymakers to how to address the necessities of the these both animal as well as human population, and also the our preserving our natural areas, preserving them and their protection. So coming to the ecological economic perspective of these biodiversity hotspots, or we can say the areas. So though I told you it is also all the ecosystems or all the landscapes, but I'm focusing mainly on the forest man landscapes, where we have the different kinds of forest produce which extracted by these tribals or the forest dwellers, and even the also the rural communities which are residing in these areas, not in terms of the commercial one, but at least for their sustenance, like fruits, nuts, flowers, leaves. Even they have different kinds of the natural dyes and colorants, different aesthetic elements, and different parts of those previously they were used in hunting also, but now it is banned. But some of the wild products which are shedded by these plants, these animals also use, like feathers and all from the wildlife. Yeah. And a variety of herbal products are available, which have in our different traditional system of medicine utility of them, and they are not in domestication so far, but up to some extent they are extracted from the wild. And under the Indian Biodiversity Act also, some concessions given to these local collectors to for their sustenance, they can collect for local livelihood, they can collect, not for commercial one, but yes, for their own sustenance they can collect those products. So that is one of the aspect, because there are also many times we think that these areas is totally restricted, but no, they have this some kind of rights and concession still in these areas for these tribal dwellers. And that's why if the diversity of that forest or that landscape will remain, so they will eke out their sustenance from that. This is already everybody knows that forest provide different products, right from the nuts, fruits, and all products, poles, wood, all the fodder, as well as its roots also used. Different economic values also we are getting, gums, resins, and all. Uh, as I was telling about these wilderness areas and protected habitats, we have the different animal products other than the meat, because the hunting is banned. But like feathers, we have the several bird nest, then some marine produce, shells and pearls. These are also some of the areas of the we are getting these product. But under the though the Wildlife Protection Act in India, at least we have the very limited access, but globally in many parts, especially African and other part of Asia, these birds are collected. Even some of the non-destructive way which are they are collecting, they are also having the market for them, and many of the communities are sustaining their lives on this basis. Even in the some of the remote northeast areas and Andaman Nicobar, these are also a good product for extraction. But in our country, it is not that much in use, because of the legal provisions are very strict, but other parts is doing. Then coming to the other benefits which are getting from that biodiversity ecosystems, these are the ecosystem services. Everybody knows that production services, regulatory services we are getting. If we maintain this biodiversity, then they are interlinked with all the channeling of the, not only at the as a germ plasm or gene pool for the future reserve, but also Also regulating the forest hydrology because of the composition of different tree shrubs and herbaceous components. Also the microorganisms associated in that. We know that most of the especially mycorrhizas and all, which required only the natural soils for that, and they are not still not able much of them commercially for the lab synthesized. They are still used from the natural. So for the such kind of microorganisms, they are still a major area for multiplication. Then also the recreational purpose, good for the pollinators, nutrient cycling and all, they are regulated in these through these ecosystem services. Valuation, I will go just for the general purpose. I mentioned that this economic value, we have the use and non-use value, which we are just mentioning. And in use value also we have the direct, indirect uses, optional uses, and non-uses, we have the existence. Just to say that why we need to focus on these spaces, because everything in this economic, what we can say, the society, everything is weighted by the value in the terms of the value in the terms of the we see that in what terms we have the value. See means not only in terms of the money or in the terms of the some economic tagging to that, but that may tagging is required to uh, give the credit to that particular value. So that's why even these are the non-use values, but they have in having how much. We know that in this pandemic, people equating the value of the oxygen liberated by the trees. So that's how we need to that valuation for that purpose also, even though we are not having the direct value that purpose. Then that's only I was saying. So Millennium Ecosystem Assessment reports also says that the ecosystem population and species are the threatened globally and being lost due to the loss of degradation of forest habitat. So tropical moist forest, the home of the largest number of the threatened species of any biome, and assured the numerous and not yet the scientifically described. So many of the species are there, and these ecosystem services are either provisioning services or cultural services or regulatory services, supportive services, all are not done by the administration or management, but also through the people participation. The participation by the local communities, especially in the cultural services, which are very, very important, because we know that the forest or these kind of wilderness areas are such a large extent that we cannot watch and ward everything unless we are convinced the peoples, though traditionally or culturally they are rich in that kind of knowledge, indigenous knowledge, they not harm these kind of plants and animals, but due to the changes, societal changes, forcing them also to lured by these kind of things, they are engaged in them. But by and large, they are in the nature lovers, and their knowledge, traditional knowledge for these kind of resources is equally important to strengthen the any kind of future management plan or any kind of designing the any kind of setup for the promotion of these biodiversity conservation aspects. We have the direct usage we already talked about, but we have the other supporting services in terms of the water cycling, nutrient cycling and all, and they are very much only when the all the components of this ecosystem are maintained in a particular population, particular strata as well. If these are not properly managed, then there will be any imbalance of any of the components. So not just like we have the disease epidemic also, we have the other natural hazards also in the area, and after that again to build up that population is very difficult. So equilibrium has to be maintained in these aspects. So this already I explained the consumptive use values and productive use values. Yes, that's the we are more nowadays thinking more about the productive use values, but as far as the livelihood aspect is concerned, it is more on the consumptive values, and which is to sustain of these local communities. So India, which is the also having major ecosystem for these means major population depending on these natural ecosystems, right from the coastal to Himalayas and desert ecosystem. The natural ecosystem providing clean water, watershed, and all different what I was saying environmental services. Many of the things which now in this what we can say the global market concept and more of the need for the natural products, because the all the cultivated products and all, there is one way or another way some problems of the health hazards people are facing. So because of the intensive agriculture practitioners, so people are again looking back for the natural products, obviously where natural products will get. So again the natural non-wood forest products which we have the in the our forest areas, just for example, like we have the Apis dorsata honeybee, wild honeybee, you know, Apis mellifera, which we are doing in the now in the beekeeping, but still those are traditional healers and all, they are using Apis dorsata honey only for their producing some medicinal formulations. Similarly, the many tussar silk also there, lac also there. These are only natural way they are emerged, and they are more focusing on this. Means they are more preferred product for especially for the health supplements and the medicinal purpose. A large number of field-based programs on this biodiversity, waste, livelihood, and poverty reductions has been carried out by different agencies across the country, or also as the region. Because of this only, to how to link these things for the economic activities. The Millennium Ecosystem Assessment warned that the cost of the failure of the biodiversity over the period of times, it has been reaching, it was estimated around $500 million has been lost in last 10-15 years. And if the same pace of extinction will remain, so we can lose the most of the biodiversity, which otherwise we have might have utilized for the people for the economic activities. Then we have to see that how this biodiversity resource management and inflations, because we know that resource is available, and that how to utilize that resource in a proper way so that the sustenance also maintain and diversity also be maintained. Then what are the dimensions in the livelihoods, because many times we confuse with the livelihoods and commercial activity. Livelihood only for the sustenance of these people only, local people only, and not in terms of the a commercial activity. When we are by prospecting any of the product for the commercial gain, so that is going beyond, and that's only the some for some resources it become a disaster, because the people start exploiting that for commercial gains. Even the locals also forced for this kind of things. So once we go for the commercial, so that commercial should not be from the natural forest, that commercial can be once we go for the domestication, and we are demarcating the separate areas other than the conservation reserves for that kind of activities. If from the natural forest any new product or new plant material or animal material, anything has been bioprospected and its utility has been explored, so it's not that we start extracting it from the natural sources only. We have to see the alternatives where it can be domesticated, where the new place or new landscape to be utilized for that purpose, not the existing one where they already, which can be used as a reserve material for the future improvement and also maintaining the population there. So because we know that in the crop improvement or any kind of improvement program, we need the diversity. Without the variability, we cannot explore it. So that variability is in terms of to be maintained in those conserved areas, not for the beyond that livelihood for the commercial gains. So that's the vision. The societal interaction and livelihoods, that the aspect which I was saying, the societal interaction means the local communities are engaged for the conservation, development, and protection of those species, and up to limited extent they can be engaged in the domestication in a particular, some has a endemic to particular area, so obviously that species has to be conserved in that areas only. And for conservation we cannot leave that thing only the nature. We have to do some human interventions for the augmentation of the population of those species which are already in the threatened or critical categories. So how to augment their population? Obviously we need the human interventions. So during their reproductive cycle, to maintain or to their regeneration, we have to assist that natural regeneration with the help of the artificially. And there we need these local people's contribution to augment the populations. But if you want to go for cultivation, then we have to go after that. But first stage to maintain the threatened species, we know that if already, yes, still the now name is changed, that in Bangalore based FRLST, Foundation for Revitalization of Local Health Traditions. So FRLST and even Ashoka also, this ATRI also doing very good work in the especially Western Ghats, where they have made these kind of conservation projects, and they identified these kind of hotspots of particular species for conserving those species with the local people. So they are getting employment for that, and these species are reinstated in those these kind of areas where the population was very less. So such kind of projects are win-win situation for the conservationists as well as the social scientists, which are seeking for their means these tribals or the locals for their employment or their sustenance for the livelihoods. Then biodiversity based livelihoods. So that already mentioned that the biological resources sustain the lives and livelihoods is required much of these populations. And yes, we know that when we have the more pressure of the developmental projects in these kind of natural reserves, which are the biodiversity hotspots, so those should be disgraced. Many times it becomes very essential, because we as a nation, we have to also see that certain strategic areas also there, and they are also equally important for these kind of bioresources. So how to make a balance for that? We see whole northeast is our very rich in this kind of bioresources, but it is also border areas, and there are also many of the road development work, everything also making the erosion of these things. But a balance has to be maintained, and these local has to be engaged in this kind of conservation projects. Then only we can have a long-term sustenance of the resources as well as the livelihoods. The biological resources experience immense pressure from these considered as a natural capital. Natural capital means these only resources. The forest is a treasure for, we know, the all these kind of resource material and all these, and also a habitat. Yes, that I was mentioning. The wildlife without the forest and without these kind of landscape with the vegetation, so we cannot have the. We need the grasslands. We need the tree cover also, and we need that good water bodies in the forest areas for the sustenance of the wildlife. And these wildlife are again are the channel for the spreading the regeneration of the species, pollination of the species, and maintaining their chance. So it is a whole the cyclic process, and all components equally important. Livelihoods, when I was dealing with the livelihoods, so it's a different way. It was said that it's comprised the capabilities, assets, activities required for the means of living. So means of living is a quoted word, because the wants are the unlimited. Yeah, as we economics, we see that economics is the discipline which for means which mainly do the activity to meet out the unlimited wants from the limited resources of the human being. So wants are unlimited, desires are unlimited, but we have to see which are the basic needs. So that's why we talk about the needs, not on the wants. So when we talk about the livelihood, we are only talking about the needs, not the wants. And again, that is from again the limited resources, which resources we have there, that resources to be how effectively can utilize. So it is not means, because many times the socio-economic criteria and that say that the tribals or these kind of rural which are living in the fringe area forest, they has to be equated with the other masses. So obviously their living and conditions and all are different. So but we at least make the need of these for their sustenance, for their food, clothing, and all minimum whatever the needs are there for their sustenance. We are talking about these livelihoods. So livelihood demand for sustenance can be cope up with the recover with the stresses and shocks for the when we want to a way of the sustainable way of the livelihoods. So it has to meet out all these kind of stresses and shocks to maintain the enhanced capabilities, assets, and activities over the period of time without undermining the natural resources, because these resources are limited and they are also variety of user diverse users. So that's why the when we talk about the diversity, so when the diversity is more, so we have the more diverse product from those areas, and it will be not put an exert or pressure on a particular product. Many times the natural phenomena of the regeneration of particular species or this what the population of particular species is declined due to one reason or unreason. So alternatives should be there. So that's why when the more diversity will be there, we will be having more diverse spectrum of the produce and alternatives of the produce for the more for the sustenance of these communities. So that will ultimately make the livelihood strategy on the sustained basis. And besides that, we can have the target on the long term basis, short term basis, as well as on the other avenues which are make them for the for this what we can say that for making these people to in a long term basis to have the employment opportunities in the times of we have livelihood framework implications, especially the social science peoples are working on that, how to make these livelihood frameworks from the approach, increase the different ways of identifying the approaches which are identifying the problems and solutions for that. In that as I told you, we cannot compare with the development practitioner to look the context of the relationship that development initiatives has become more process oriented. Livelihood approach represent the important shift away on the focus of the project inputs and outputs. This is in terms of the generalized way, but when we talk about the biodiversity based livelihoods framework, so there obviously the focus, as I told you, our focus is to have the more diverse options with these people for any kind of produce. Suppose they are getting a particular food items from a particular species. So if they have alternatives of the 4, 5, 3 species or the vegetation for them, so obviously it will not exert pressure on a particular species. Similar way with the other produce also, either it is a natural dyes, colorants, fiber products, any of them. So everything there should be some alternatives or optional are there. So if one species having less population, we can have a direct for that. But if only one species is targeted, then it will. We have a very simple example of the katha, Acacia catechu, and that is only the one species which are having the more tree species has slow growing comparatively, and is hardwood giving the katha which is we have. So if you see that the condition of the utility use of the katha globally, or at least in this continent where we more use in Asian continent, India itself, so we don't have the number of sufficient population of the trees or growing stock of the trees for extracting the katha from that product, because we not have any other, or we not develop or not by prospect any other alternative of that katha. Someone Indonesia, they have the Ankeria gambia, one alternative as a climber, woody climber for that, but that has been only restricted that tropical countries only. Even in India we are tried 2, 3 times for introduction of that Ankeria gambia, but it was not become that much applicable. Similarly, you see that lac, they are also mainly host on the trees species only. So that also we maintain for the tree species. But the other perennials, woody perennials of the shrubby nature like Flamingia species and all has been tried, but it still not become though that much good alternative for that production of those things. So such kind of alternatives we are talking about, we need. Okay, if you see the contribution of this biodiversity waste, especially the wilderness tourism, what we are seeing that most of these African countries, there is they are rich in biodiversity, and most of the tourism wildlife based tourism is based there, and they have more contribution on their GDP, because these most of people are engaged in these activities, and those tribals which were traditionally was wildlife hunters become a wildlife conservationist, and they are approach to this these kind of management system. So there is need to have that kind of societal interactions of or revenue generation model for these people of to which can they integrate in the business model in this. There are some of the integrated ecosystem management on the basis of either it is we have to see the ecocentric way, not on the anthropocentric way for coordination approach. Because if you see the eco philosophy, which says that human being has to broaden its spectrum in terms of the utilization of the any bioresources, thinking or conserving in that way that not only to see self consumption purpose, it has to see the biocentric way and also ecocentric way. Biocentric means how the other biological organisms can be utilizing that resources. It is not for only for you, other also utilizing other your other biological components also utilizing that. And ultimately the at ecosystem level, that is ecocentric, has to be seen how the whole ecosystem to be remain balanced. So once we have that kind of ecocentric approach, then we can think a broader way. But if you have an anthropocentric approach, then that philosophy goes against the ecosophy. We many of the these kind of especially in these wilderness habitat, these kind of projects has been launched across the globe, like Malawi principal ecosystem management. They have based on these kind of larger landscape level, even the trans frontier conservation areas, African continent, that many of these kind of biosphere reserves has been interlinked, and so that along can be done. Similar has been also planned in India, also in the northeast to up to Nepal and Bhutan, from the Manas Tiger Reserve to the up to the Kanchenjunga and going to Bhutan, and then that Tribhuvan National Park in the Nepal. The whole corridor to be as a bias means these what we call the biosphere reserves are interlinking together. So these kind of trans frontier conservation areas are also required for increasing the biodiversity in those areas, because once we have the larger landscape, so we can have the transfer of the not only the these migratory animals or like we have these tiger and all, but also they will also have a spread of these plant species also from one biosphere another species reserve, and the crossing, natural crossing and all, and that will ultimately produce a new species. So that kind of natural crossing will promote when we reduce the barriers of the national boundaries in terms of the frontier transfers. The forest-based livelihood, we already talk about these different produce we are getting, and to promote the conservation measures, especially when we talk about this biodiversity. So most of the thought comes our who will conserve them, how it can be policies to be made to conserve them. Then we need some kind of livelihood initiatives in support of conservation, like to incentivize these peoples, or in terms of especially wildlife cases, we are compensating them for any kind of loss to their crops or their animals. And also simultaneously we are suggesting for alternative livelihoods, because as I told you, in African model, most of these were the tribal areas were local hunters and all, and now they turn as a wildlife conservation because they engage in the wildlife conservation projects, and they are getting their employment from that. So obviously once they have an alternative livelihood, so that is they means they are easy to switch for that, but we have to give the option. Similarly in forest, what we say in forestry, it is not only the timber. We know that in forestry or in forest sources, maximum portion of the in terms of resource generation is the non-wood forest product or non-timber forest product. They are having the major role in the meeting out the demand, consumptive demand, as well as the other produce. So how to make the the resource mobilization pattern for this kind of non-wood forest product, that is important. And currently what we in the colonial forestry approach, what we has that was only the timber based. Only the last 20 years we are now focusing upon the this kind of 20-30 years on the non-wood forest product, because these non-wood forest produce is, first of all, most of them are the non harvested by non-destructive way, and they are is a major resource which are having different values. Most of them also are not bioprospected for the utility also. So this is the gray area which can be utilized, and that bioprospecting can be also done through these collaboration of these local peoples, because they have the traditional knowledge of these resources since a long time, and they are using for a long time. But especially for their herbal uses and other kind of food additives and ethnic foods, what we say, that is there. So that need to be explored in that way. I think the already mentioned these non-timber forest produce and all, and we know this has the also a potential for the commercialization also. Though we are talking about the this livelihood sustenance only, but even some of the products which are in more in demand, that can be domesticated, they can be planted in the commercial basis, and that can have a good approach. Many of these species of the plantation species, they have the good, like we have an example of the rubber plantation across the Malaysia, they are growing, but it has originated from the wild only, and they are domesticated in a large scale, and now it's become a major issue. So many communities are depending on these rubber plantation, even in India also this. But yes, it's required, this had to be outside the natural forest, some of the other areas where they should not disturb the already existing biodiversity, because the monoculture is against the biodiversity. So the limit of monoculture is only those areas where we don't have any kind of other vegetation or new area to be vegetated. But in terms of or we have to make some efforts to how to increase that biodiversity of those where we are going to plant them. So NTFPs based, many of the organizations are working, not only FO but also the other SIDA, C4, IUCN, and many other organizations working on that. One of the project, World Bank funded project on the biodiversity conservation and rural livelihood improvement project, BCRLP, is already running in India also. Mainly it was first done in the Ascot and this little ran of Kutch on the pilot basis, and they are also they tried how these communities, local communities like in Ascot in Almora, they have the Banraji and other primitive tribes of Bhotia and all, and they were traditionally was gathering, hunting gathering and all this, and the alternatives to, because that was declared as a wildlife sanctuary, so alternative arrangement has to be done for the therefore livelihood options. So they were given the herbal species cultivation of these by the Besa Sangh of the Uttarakhand. Similarly, in the little land of Kutch, these different Koli, Patel, and all these tribes were there in the that little land of Kutch, and they are mainly engaged in the salt and charcoal making and all. Some of them are pastoralists, so they were again given a separate land for settled agriculture, and also engaged with these kind of livelihood projects by which they can eke out, and their dependency on the those forest resources, which because that we are demarcating for particular objective point ago, so we have to reduce pressure or make them a participatory way to work on that. So different agencies, including the Wildlife Institute and all, was engaged, and these especially, and later on Gir National Park, they are also included in that, and they are in that project running very successful because of the ecotourism or the that kind of way. So the major aspect of this only how best we can manage this biodiversity community management, not only in the forest landscape but also in the other landscapes too. And once we do these strategies, we can have the a cumulative effect on the not on agriculture, natural biodiversity, and this already Biodiversity International is working on that, how the community can be engaged on the sustenance of the biodiversity, because everything cannot be we do by the cryopreservation or making the NVPGR like institutes. We need the in situ reserve for these bioresources. The in situ bioresource will focus for future options for the improvement. So unless we maintain the germ plasma or gene pool in the natural reserve, it cannot be utilized for the future. So that's the strategy is required. Just for one or two slides for the this Bundelkhand region. So it's mainly the dry tropical deciduous and thorn forest areas, and we know that in this most of the areas we have this dependency on the most of the wild fruits and flowers, especially Mawa is one of them, and Tendu Patta is another thing. And they are also even the fuel wood and all requirement meet out from these areas only. So because of the no other alternatives are there, so these communities are more dependent on the forest, and that's why once it was a very thick forest areas, but the resource put under so much stress by the local or the rural people because of no other alternatives. We keep on losing the not only the diversity, but whatever existing bioresources were available in the forest, that has been lost. And now the situation is become that we have to manage in the new way to how to revegetate that areas. So many utility produces there, but there is no efforts to for revegetate. Even I never seen in so many years that anything done on the especially the tendu leaves, the Diospyros melanoxylon, which is the majorly used for the BD making every year cut, but any conservation efforts or any kind of exploration outside the natural forest like tendu. Why not tendu can be grown like lower plantation for the domestication and all this purpose, but we thought that it's coming like just like we are saying the beauty of monosperma is coming naturally, so there is no need for, but it has some limit. After a few years of time, maybe 20-30 years, we don't find these species also, they also vanish out, which is now has a major resource bioresource for these communities. They will not remain there. So we have now only we have to think, unless it become a go a critical level, we have to see about this plan for them. Okay, this already it's a international level. If you see the local communities, so we have the potential aid for conservations, and many of the countries has especially the ethnobotanical roles, not only in India but in globally across the African continent and this Latin America and all. They are also having various uses of the fuel fodder, not only fuel fodder but ethnobotanical medicinal uses. Our neighboring Nepal and Bhutan both are having very good ethnobotanical knowledge on this utilization of these bioresources, and especially even for their livestock management for their for fuel fodder purpose of the many species they have identified and they are using for them. Okay, this already talked about biodiversity loss, well documented, and we need to how to check that. We have to see that the extension threat can be reduced over the period of times. So there need a synergy between the biodiversity conservation and human welfare, and impact of the biodiversity erosion and conservation upon the human welfare. The both has to be addressed. Biodiversity is not we see that in terms of the commercial exploitations, but also the livelihoods. Commercial exploitation only possible when we see the a resource having plenty and we have an alternative habitat, alternative place for that restoration, then only we can go for that. Just by because this biodiversity which already explained, so this is how the biodiversity become an important component for the ecosystem services. And the bottom what I showing that the livelihoods, though biodiversity generating livelihoods, but by prospecting and scaling up can lead to the commercial as well. So hello.
भाई हमने बोला कि 31 मार्च तक पैसा
Hello. Dr. Yumnam, please mute yourself.
इसीलिए मैं नहीं जा रहा था, मुझे पता था।
Dr. Yumnam,
ये हमारा एफएनडी वाला है।
Dr. Yumnam,
please.
Sorry,
Thank
sir.
you.
Sorry. Yeah, please,
Thank
please
you.
carry
So,
on.
biodiversity, we see that why the transition from the livelihoods when we're going for bioprospecting and scaling up, then is coming to commercialing. But it is only the condition is that, or that when we have the sufficient population or sufficient resource base for that, then only go for commercialization, or we have the alternative from the natural areas for growing of this such kind of bioresource for making commercialization. Not from the natural resource, it's not possible. We have only the targeted areas itself not is there, so that's required. Last, coming to the agriculture landscape, we know that agrobiodiversity is also equally important in agriculture landscape, and that are also all those functions which are from the forest functions. So agrobiodiversity is also equally important to maintain an agricultural landscape, not only for the diverse food production system, which now we are talking about the organic farming, natural farming and all, but that is also offshoots of all this only. Okay, why we were not able to harness this kind of agrobiodiversity for the multiplus uses, and we only become the wheat paddy system to feed the maximum. When we already talking about now the from food security to nutrition security, then we need the agrobiodiversity in that context also. And when we have the agrobiodiversity, that will again link with the livelihood options, so that agroecosystems functions and ecosystem services and goods will be more diversified in terms of the produce in that kind of landscape, agriculture landscape. So there is also need, and here the role of agroforestry and its utility is more in terms of the exploring the this agrobiodiversity, especially in agriculture landscape, because agroforestry is considered one of the sustainable land use systems. So when we have any system in a sustainable land use system, then obviously its role becomes more important in terms of the sustenance of the livelihoods also, or economic employment generation or income generation for the locals. And this we link with the climate smart agriculture and natural farming. Even the we also talking about the reed plus and agriculture that help milk the, especially the challenge of the climate change and all, where the all the species are under the pressure of the climatic aberrations, either in terms of the loss of the species or other things. That's why the Green India Mission as well as National Mission on the this agroforestry, National Mission of Sustainable Agriculture, both are addressing through the agroforestry for the increase in this. So finally, the and I can say that biodiversity inherent quality of an ecosystem sustenance, and the forest is the major source of biodiversity in terrestrial ecosystem. So, though I already told, the marine ecosystem is also more diverse and more equally competent, means is more important in for the overall the planet sustenance. The forest diversity linked livelihood options are the more sustainable and economic, and that's why we have to see the how to harness the diverse bioresource in terms of the employment opportunities, or you can say the livelihoods. The forest diversity creates more ecosystem services than the monoculture and harness the site productivity by the vegetation stratification, both in spatial and temporal manner. That I told you, because we are if you, that's why we say that tropical ecosystem is having more diversity and more productivity in terms of the not only the product generation, but also in terms of the photosynthesis and all nutrient cycling, because it's utilizing maximum these resources for conversion in terms of the our resource generation. The local biodiversity conservation and bioprospecting resources, that is equally important. Biodiversity board and biodiversity committee already doing at the local level. We have the biodiversity register in the as per our NBA also. So we are maintaining that, and that when we have the documentation, so we will be knowing that which particular species is under threat and which well. So continuous monitoring of the resources is equally important for the conservation, not only conservation, but for the linking with the livelihoods also. Strengthening the cottage industry, livelihood options, income generation, employment services, then tribal and rural communities, which are the major target of this promotion of the biodiversity based livelihood opportunities, has to be trained, has to be make well aware of the utility of the biodiversity, and they may be sensitized if that biodiversity, though these are the traditional peoples and they know, but the societal interaction with the mainstream people, they also has that kind of aspirations for coming up in the new movement. So they are also not think about that way what the traditional peoples used to think. So that's also making they need to sensitize, and I mean again aware about this. And as I told, we need these kind of resource based record and plan for utilization plan, so that it can remain a sustainable basis for the longer period of time, long term strategies, not as a short term strategies. So that's from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. You have given a very illustrative and an comprehensive presentation on the forest-based or biodiversity-based livelihood opportunities. It was really wonderful listening to you, and I now invite all the participants with your questions to Dr. Dobrial sir. We do have some questions in the chat box, but before I move to the chat box, I would really appreciate if the participants would come forward and ask their questions. So by the time I think participants taking some time in their brainstorming, let me take the questions from the chat box. And I'm sure that the participant who have not asked a single question till date, today is the 9th day. For example, Dr. Dinesh Kumar Sharma, Dr. Himshikha, Dr. Ravi Bharadwaj, Dr. KP Dwivedi, Dr. Swapna, and so on, Dr. Meena Chaudhary, Dr. Saresh. Please keep your questions ready, for this really important and valuable presentation. So the first question is, what are the forest products, sir, you have listed in the slide, the forest dwellers already involved in, but they still are very poor. So what can government can do to improve their status?
Yes, it's right that most of the products which are, because we know that what we talked about, most of the products are there. Like we talk about the tendu leaves. Since a long period of time, I think last 50 years we are using that, and still those tendu leaf collectors are conditions are not good. But that I mean to say. Similarly, other products are also there. Somewhere we have the different arrangements has been made, like we have the forest corporations, we have the tribal cooperatives, and through that sale has to be done, or means they has to be given fair prices. But the lacking is not in the plan, but in the delivery system, by which like forest department is saying that we assign this thing to the lamps or traffic, and traffic people are collecting that and giving the forest department, or they are engaging some contractor. So the monitoring and delivery, that is the lacking part. Otherwise the government this system is well defined. We see in many also, not only in these terms, even that example I given, you see the simple thing of the other product which collecting, like mawa flowers they are collecting, even mawa seeds we are collecting. So mawa the flower they are collecting, if we allow that is what we say, the nationalized item through the forest department only they can sell, or by their counterparts, whatever agencies they are remarketing. So one thing can be done for improvement, if it can be open market, but through some regulations, or from the government setup, either through forest corporation, minor forest corporation, all. So that can give a competitive edge to sell. But there also the past, that was the practice in past, before the 1950s, before the creation of the forest corporation, that was the practice. The contractor used to collect not only the non-wood forest product, but also the timber also. But it went wrong, and there was more oppression of these societies. So that's why it channelized through government system. But in government system also, it was not improved, so that only I think that the delivery or the monitoring of the system is not accurate, and the cooperatives, the societies are self-driven. They are cooperative societies. So I don't know why that has been not improved in that way. So this required to relook in terms of the execution only.
Certainly, sir. It is a challenging task, to implement all those things, and very much necessary to do work at the microfinancing and how these corporates and local communities are working all together, because unfortunately the line agencies who are involved in such activities are working in these silos. So we do not know, or they do not know, that what are the activities and government aided projects and schemes are running parallelly for the welfare of the marginalized communities. So coming to that, sir, there is one more question. Similar.
I think he is
please,
asking
sir.
something, Mohammad Nasir. Huh?
Sir, please unmute yourself. Sir, unmute.
Yes, please.
Namaskar, sir. Hope you remember me.
Yes.
We met when we were on the visit to Jhansi, sir.
Oh, yes.
I was along with Aishwarya Maheshwari. Okay, sir. So actually, my question is, there are so many kind of NTFs are there, and I believe that all the NTFs have potential to give employment or livelihood. But at the same time, it is also a fact that the market for these NTFs are very localized. Means sometimes if I grow a leg here in Bada, we will not get a market. Many times we have got a complaint from the farmers that they grew the medicinal plant and they are not having market where to sell it. So we as a scientist, what can we do to so what can we possible solution we can as a scientist can develop that they will get a market, means we can make the distribution smooth.
Yes, that only they actually one aspect was from the forest, natural forest. So obviously, natural forest is controlled by. But if anything coming in the community land or community forest, there just we can make, like in agriculture we have the like self-help group or FPOs concept. Same way in NTFPs can be done. I think some states, some beginning has been done. I think in Gujarat, I came to know they used to doing this kind of in community forest. Through our JFM aspect, they are taking in that. So where they are linking directly with the market. So there it can be possibility, because yes, it's regulated by the market forces, and still people believe that whatever coming from the non-forest areas, these kind of NTFPs, they are also treating that as from coming from forest. So first the traders also not taking that thing. So that thing also be taken into account, how to regularize that kind of market. And yes, potential is there. And what second thing, market is required the regular supply. Suppose this year we are supplying, what is happening in market cases of the medicinal plant of these kind of products. So they have the some few pockets and limited supply. This year they are growing, next year not coming. So they need some continuous supply, because the traders require that time the chicks. That was linkage. That is also one aspect. But yes, we can as a scientist, we can make a ourselves a channel between the market forces and the technical forces, so that can alignment can be done. That can be possible.
Sir, there is a similar question in my chat box. So it is a similar question, but it is also asking about how we can remove the mediators. So they are getting richer, they are getting getting the major chunk of money, but the people at the grassroots level are not getting much return of their efforts. So how the mediators can be removed? Is there any answer to that?
See, even the regular market, which is more we can say streamlined market of agriculture produce, there also we are not able to remove the mediators. So in this trade, we have to get we have to a long journey still. But it can be possible. Only the thing is that we have to means see that which are the major industries or which are the major partners in that production system, where we can require that kind of raw material. So once that can be done, and their government institution, as Dr. Mohammad was saying, that where our role can be done as an institution, we can become a mediatory, so that can become a trust building, because they need, suppose a farmer is selling directly to them, what is the guarantee of the product and also the supply and return of the money. So that kind of mechanism can be done, which done in agriculture produce also, that kind of mechanism can be possible, but only the thing, quantity is very less. So still it is going through these kind of localized market only, not at the national or regional perspective. That is only the thing.
Exactly, sir, exactly. We have some more questions. I can see some, participants have enabled their videos.
Mahesh is raising hand.
Yeah, Dr. Mahesh, please.
Sir, this is not related to any question. This is a kind of continuation of discussion. You have marked that mediators should be removed out from this bioresources trade. What I feel is it is very difficult, as Dr. Dobrial has also mentioned, that there is a very unorganized sector. This sector is very unorganized.
Yeah. Dr. Mahesh, have we lost you? Dr. Mahesh, are you there? I think we lost Dr. Mahesh. Anyway, so who is the next asking question? Dr. Himshikha? Please unmute yourself.
Hello, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
A very nice presentation, and you have very briefly informed about non-wood forest produce, and really glad to hear from you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
All right, so that was not a question, it was a compliment.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Good to see you, Dr. Himshikha. Please, enable your videos, and at least, if you do not have a question, this is a platform where you can even compliment our resource person. That is, a worthy compliment we would consider. So a compliment is equivalent, a question. We would give equal mark. It is a new trend Dr. Himshikha has started.
No, they ask question, no problem, because that's why we can also see many of the things are there, which
really, sir, and keep continuing the discussion. That is what we have been discussing in the morning, in the first half as well, that the ecosystem based, or the forestry or the biodiversity based livelihood opportunities are so unorganized that we do not have substantial data to support that how much it is contributing in the livelihood of the local communities opportunities. And it is really difficult to get that amount of information. And to share one of the experiences what I had in the Hemis National Park in Ladakh, that the wildlife based ecosystem opportunities, for example, how much livelihood it is contributing in the villages which are in the Hemis National Park. We did a socio-economic surveys. We started with the local communities. We checked with the government records. We gathered the per capita income of the rural livelihoods, and then we with some sort of analysis we came up that it was more than 40%, almost, I think, if I can recall it, almost 45% livelihood has been shifted from the traditional way of lifestyle of the Himalayan communities in that particular patch of land, from the traditional to the wildlife ecotourism based kind of opportunities. So there are alternatives available, and there are scientific data available if we take a courage to gather that kind of amount of information.
What I was talking about, the project was 2009 or 2011 was started, that biodiversity based rural livelihood improvement project in again in wildlife areas only, that Askot and Gir, as well as in Run of Kutch. So in especially Gir, I was knowing that most of these were in Gir, the buffer zone, most of the orchards, mango orchards were there. So when the government reduced that area, means there was a problem, and also the most of they are engaged with the again herding and all this. So they was given more thrust to the ecotourism based or in these activities, like some of them engage the gypsy, some of them trekker and all, and these kind of things they are engaged them, because the tourist thrust was more there. So even means all the people which are in and around, they try to all to consume in that process. So the economic activity increased, so that is also the proportional where, but same as not might have done in Almora and Ascot, because there is not that much activity which we seen in the Gir National Park. So that also there, but yes, certainly we need the documentation for those things. Unless we have the documentation of these kind of activities, we cannot, because government for making the policy also need the data. And
exactly.
But it's good that in wildlife management plan and all, they have included how these particular protected areas and wildlife sanctuaries has means stand up for these local communities which were depending on them. And even if you see the Rajaji National Park and other park where still the resettlement is not completely done, there also this question is keep on rising, what alternatives to be given. Like you see one Gujars, they given the alternative for the settled their animal husbandry practice and all, but still they are coming to back, and many efforts has been done. But what are the factors which are not able to convince them that these societal aspect actually, which we are saying to many big India and especially in these developing countries, they have the more socio-cultural links, which also not delineate them from the already their traditional process. It will take one more generation to convince them. These are things.
Exactly, sir. And I had an opportunity to work across these landscape. For example, I did my master's in Gir. So the Kesar mango, actually, a very popular mango comes from there. So these communities are very much involved in the ecotourism community activities, as well as Ascot, the entire Kailash Mansarovar tract actually, went through along with the edges of the Kali River in the Ascot. So some of the communities are getting opportunities in the form of pilgrims, those who go to Om Parvat or Chota Kailash, or to the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, they go. And similarly, the things are also coming up in the Kutch, as well as in the greater run of Kutch, in the lesser run of Kutch, in the form of the tent city, which is a Run Mahotsav, in the winters, which was started in early 2000. So there are activities, but unfortunately, the point is, sir, that we do not have a central database that how much it is contributing in the overall livelihood, so that we can have that scientific data available, that this much amount has been shifted from traditional way of lifestyle to alternative opportunities. Anyway, sir, it was great, and I would we have not heard anything from Dr. KP Dwivedi, from Dr. Sandeep Raut, and I would really appreciate if they also come forward. Dr. Maqbool. Anyway, sir, people are thanking you for such an illustrative and comprehensive presentation. And you started from the biodiversity loss, the national and international treaties, and then you took us through the entire journey of the biodiversity based livelihood opportunities, as well as challenges and threats in this particular sector. It was really wonderful listening to you, sir, and you have provided a very holistic approach, as well as the reasonable and logical questions which needs to be answered. Because sir bolte hai na कि there is a famous popular शेर, जवाब जिनके नहीं होते वो सवाल होते हैं, जो देखने में नहीं कुछ कमाल होते हैं. So asking a right question is very important, and I'm sure that all our participants would agree that asking the right question is very important. So with these words, sir, for a formal vote of thanks, I would now invite Dr. Kaushal to please deliver a formal vote of thanks to you. Dr. Kaushal, please.
Thank you, Dr. Aishwarya. Good evening to all. Thank you, sir, for accepting this invitation to deliver your lecture, and really it was a very knowledgeful lecture. You thoroughly cover and you give a thorough lecture and covering you so many aspects of biodiversity, types of biodiversity, various values of ecosystem services. That is nowadays very popular topic, and journals are easily accepting so many articles and papers related to this topic. And no doubt our participants will be enriched by these latest data that you provided, and very information which are related to the landscape values, ecotourism, nature-based ecotourism, and various anti-IB, no doubt. These are very common, but these are play very important role in the livelihood of the tribals that you cover thoroughly and very nicely. And sir, you always guide us. You are in so many aspects related to academics and so many things. We are always thankful to you. So on behalf of the organizing committee and my own behalf, I would like to thank you, sir, for sparing the time from your hectic schedule and giving your valuable talk. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Namaskar, sir.
Thank you.
Okay,
sir.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sir, please, you may, so that we can have some.
I also thank to all of you and listening to my lecture, and as you said that most of the things all participants perceived in good taste. So we hope in future also to they are free to any kind of queries, any kind of willingness to tell me. So thank you.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Bye, sir. All right. So, dear participants, this was the end of another day, and this was also the end of one of the themes, which was commercial significance of forest resources. So, from tomorrow onwards, we are having another exciting and very important theme, which is biodiversity conservation and management, new trends, emerging challenges, and opportunities. So I'm sure that most of us, I would say all of us who are from the forestry and wildlife background are looking forward to this particular theme. And in this theme, we have tried to compile lectures and sessions on the wildlife sciences, on the forestry sector, on the agroforestry, on the biodiversity conservation. So this theme is perhaps, in my opinion, is going to be the longest theme, which will be till 17th March. That means, just before Holi. So, frankly speaking, from the organizing committee, we are really looking forward to this particular theme. And more importantly, the resource persons have been from the really, key and flagship institutions across the country as well as overseas. For example, KASRI, for example, Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun, for example, Oxford University, then, TFRI, RFRI, and of course, some of these very senior IFS officials would be, deliberating in this particular theme. So I'm sure that we all are very interested and will enthusiastically participate in this theme and the upcoming lectures. We really look forward to your more interactive and more enthusiastic participation. So with these words, thank you very much and have a great evening to all of you.